So do you think that Korean pop music has a real shot at the mainstream audience in the U.S. Or like around the globe? Like, because for now, it seems like some people know K-pop. Well, everybody knows K-pop, but there's some people actually listen to K-pop and then they really love it. But it hasn't reached the mainstream audience. You can't really say that. So do you think the Korean pop music has a potential to reach the majority U.S. entertainment scene? Or is it going to be just remain as a minor genre?
I hope it remain. I hope like it remains as a minor genre. But I hope that like some of these indie rock groups in Korea that are actually very talented, but they get absolutely no recognition. Like I go to some shows here in Korea where a group, if they were as talented as they are here in Korea, if they were in the U.S. and realized by a record label, they would be all over the place, but since they're
there's
in
no
Korea,
band industry here.
Yeah.
It's all K-pop.
So it seems like if you're not K-pop, you have no shot of making it. What I wish K-pop would kind of. What I think it is I think it's basically a bad copy of American pop from the 1990s with some sexy dance moves. I don't think there's any talent in that, but I do think there's a lot of Korean musicians who have a lot of talent, but they're going to remain unrecognized just because of the way the music industry is set up here.
So is that what you're playing on a Korean K-pop? Korea FM.
Well, that was one of the things. That was one of the original reasons this summer why I had the idea for a while, but one of the reasons why it eventually came to be was because I played in bands, and I'm not trying to kid myself. Like I think I'm a very good musician, but like it's a hobby. But I have friends who, foreigners and Koreans, who are just amazing and they're so talented here, but there's not an industry for live music bands.
Right.
Even international acts, Seoul is not a huge draw. Like you're starting to get more, but it's always other places.
Like Tokyo or
Tokyo,
like,
sure.
Yeah.
So it's changing here, but I have friends that are just amazing. And if they were in the States, if they're in Portland, or if they're in Austin, or if they're in Boston, where I went to school, or something like that, they could have some real potential, to do some things. But here, they're just playing shows in Hongdae, or they're playing shows in HBC or Itaewon. So I wanted to put them on the internet radio, because Korean media, for the most part, they might have an interview here, they might play a song, but when you listen to some radio programs that are supposed to play like indie music and stuff, it's like K-pop indie music. It's not what I would think of indie music as a native English speaker. So maybe it's a different terminology, but I don't think I'm the only one who thinks that.
I think countries always export their worst music. Like America, we export like Miley Cyrus and Kanye West. I think these guys are like no talent hacks. They shouldn't be famous.
Yeah.
But and Korea does the same thing. And a lot of these groups, they don't write their own music. And a lot of these artists that that are from America that are exported all over the world, they're not writing their own music.
Yeah, Canada is exporting Justin Bieber, so it's...
Yeah. I mean, Justin Bieber is another example.
Unfortunately, the United States has kind of adopted Justin Bieber at this point.
Like why is that guy famous, and why is he famous in Korea when there's so many other artists that are...
But the thing about Justin Bieber, though, is that he became really popular, but he was like poor and sort of self-made and stuff.
Oh, he was?
Yeah. His mom posted the videos
and
stuff, and so obviously he's the top of stuff now, and everyone helps him. But he rose, When you see a lot of these K-pop stars, it's not like they're people who lived in rural Korea who started posting stuff, and then they became these are a lot of well-off people who know people, and sometimes these are very young people who then go to the auditions and they become talented and stuff like that. But I think even in the States, even if you become a pop star, there's more of your creative input to get there. We don't have companies in the States who have television shows like on multiple networks, multiple days throughout the week, where they're trying to assemble a group.
Well, they kind of are. We do like
not to the level here.
What's it? America's Got Talent. Yeah.
Other things, but that's the exception. In Korea, it's the rule.
Right.
It's the rule. In Korea, it's the exception when you have someone who is self-made that comes up. Where in America, I would say at least it's less of an exception. So
like recently there was an incident like there was a Taiwanese K-pop star, Cho Zui, and she was waving a Taiwanese flag on the Korean TV, which is like waving her own country's flag, and which shouldn't be a problem. But there was a huge backlash by Chinese netizens. Like, there's a lot of people in China, obviously, and her company, her talent agency company, made her just make this humiliating public.
Well, they say they didn't do it.
That.
Well, no. Well, I don't know how old she is now, but I think she was 16 when it happened. 16, 17. I'm not saying that I agree one way or the other, but it was JYP Entertainment, right?
JYP Entertainment.
They're saying that they didn't force her, and I don't know if there's any direct evidence that they did. So at this point, it's all speculation.
Yeah.
I think, the whole thing is out of her control. So, did she decide to wave a flag on the video? Everyone in the video, in the group, they all had their flags. So wherever they were from, they had their flags. When she was holding the Taiwanese flag, she also had the Korean flag at the same time.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is that she didn't make any political choice by doing that. And it was a setup, like, on the stage. So, you can say the other way, but then, a lot of people say that JYP Entertainment, her company, made her do that. That's kind of an example of a Korean entertainment industry, how they operate and how they take care of their talents. So even there was a couple of days ago, there was a BBC report, and they said that the Zhui incident was a prime example of the dark side of Asia's pop music industry, where talent agency companies wield their iron fists against their own talents. So do you agree with that? Or if you do agree, then what's your assessment? What's your comment on that?
Well, I think there was a write-up from a foreigner a few years ago. He basically explained the whole, the way it's set up is a very rigorous process. You're basically at their beck and call whenever they want you. I'm sure that goes on, but I'm sure it also goes on in the American music industry as well. So I wouldn't say that's Korea
But in the States,
specific.
they don't really control, not really that hands-on, control their personal life.
There's control, but not, I don't think anything.
Yeah.
Not anywhere
My response to all this is that, is anyone shocked?
No.
I know this exists.
Yeah.
Does anyone who is surprised at this?
Is that right? Is that we
Well, I don't think it's right, but for instance, if I was 15, 16, 17 years old and they were like, "Do you want to be a superstar and have the possibility to be super rich and own your own companies and stuff?" Yes, I would love to do that. Okay, then you have to dress, you have to be in a video, and we're gonna, probably. I assume the girls in the video were not like, "Hey, let's wave flags." I'm sure that was someone's idea, right?
Yeah.
Now they didn't do it to get them in trouble because they didn't think that was going to happen. But I'm just saying is that they don't control a lot of their decisions. But everyone knows that, and I would probably make that deal, right? So I don't know if it's wrong because it's helping the people and people are buying the music and people are liking the music, but. It's not the way I would want to have it set up if I could choose a music industry. I don't think it's the way it should be set up, but I'm not a huge K-pop fan. So for K-pop fans, they might not care that the artist is not writing the music, or they might not care that the artist is just doing exactly what they're told because they like it. And and if you like it, and if the artists are adults or near adults and they can make decisions for themselves, I'm not going to poo-poo that. I'm not going to listen to it.
Let's get to the next topic. Hell Joseon. You guys covered this in your Only in Korea episode, one of your episodes. So just to give you a little bit background on this term, Hell Joseon is a term newly coined by the young generation of Korea, and they use it, and this is a self-mocking term. They use it to describe their own situation being socially and economically marginalized. Joseon is the name of old dynasty, that lasted until the late 19th century. So they call it Hell Joseon, which means that Hell Korea. So this is hell. So according to them, the Korean society is a hell because all the social and economic powers are exclusively controlled by a handful minority of the establishment. And the young generation coming out of low-income families don't have a shot at getting richer and getting better. So Hell Joseon, is it real or is it exaggerated? What's your? Obviously, we're not experts, we're not social scientists, but we can just freely talk about it. What do you think? Is that real or is that exaggerated? From your point of view.
Everything's exaggerated one way or the other, but in general, Hell Joseon is very real. Yeah. In any English teacher or anyone who lives here probably would know that. Like we were talking before, the Korean counterparts that work at the schools or the Hagwons, they probably get paid less.
Your own life.
No, but I'm just saying, in general, they probably get paid less, they probably work longer. And I know Koreans who work full-time or longer, and then I'm like, oh, how much do you make a month? And I'm like, well, that's how much you make a month? Because they live at home oftentimes until they get married, so they can live at home and not have to pay for everything, where oftentimes in the West, or specifically in the United States, you move out when you're 18, you move out sometime around there, and you have to live on your own. So people here, low wages, always have to be at the office, lots of expectations. They have to study their entire lives to get into a good university. But now Korea has really, really, really high unemployment for like 20-something-year-olds, right? Highest, I believe it's the highest in the OECD. There are other good things going on with the Korean economy. It just was named for the third year in a row by Bloomberg the most innovative economy in the world. But high unemployment
It's upside, but
for 20-year-olds. So these 20-year-olds, they go to Hagwons, they go to school, they try to learn English and do all these things, and then they go to like a Sky University or another good university, and then they can't find a job. So if they could go through all of that and find a job, okay, fair enough. It's the system. Maybe it's bad, but there's some light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of people aren't seeing that light, and I don't know if that light's going to be there for a lot of people, at least in the way that they thought, the way that they prepared for it.
What was it, like the 8 out of they do surveys, or this is surveys. I don't know how accurate they are, like online surveys, but they'll say like this last week, I think. Rocket
80%?
News released one that said 8 out of 10 20-somethings want to leave Korea. So I mean that's a very bad sign if you're especially with the problem with the birth rate here, and that's another issue related to that term is that people can't have kids, or they can't have more than 1 or 2 kids because it's so expensive.
Or they're working, they don't have time.
Yeah, there's no time. I mean, also you used to be able to go work for a big company here and earn, as a guy, you could earn enough money to support your family, whereas now it's like both people have to work, so it's just, and then the price of housing also here is very high. That's a problem in the States too. Like a lot of our, my parents were able to buy a house because housing was cheap. And people in Korea, your parents were probably able to afford a house on the wage they were making, but people our age aren't able to afford those prices, and
it's a different system, and it has its own unique pros and cons. So like Jeonse, right? So you don't own the apartment, but you throw down thousands of dollars and you live there rent free, and you just have to pay like some upkeep or like pay for your water, your electricity, or something like that. I've never run into that anywhere else in the world. Maybe it exists.
It's a Korean thing.
But
Korean thing.
I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't be surprised if it exists somewhere, but it definitely seems like it's a Korean thing, right? If you have the money, it's great. I know people who have gotten the cash to just get a giant apartment, and then they had to pay back.
You mean Koreans?
Yeah, well, so they get a loan, right?
Did they get the money from their parents?
Well, so the person I'm speaking of specifically, and this is just one example, but he got a loan from a bank. Okay? And he had to pay interest on the loan. And so he threw down all this money, he got an apartment, and he had to pay interest on the loan, but the interest on the loan was much cheaper than paying rent. And so he rented out the rooms to people, and through that, it was very good for him. Now, obviously, that's just one situation, but there can be good things about this, but a lot of people, they see the cons where they can't come up with like $200,000, $300,000 just to have somewhere to live in Seoul. Now outside of Seoul, the housing is not nearly as bad, but it's like half the country basically lives here, and everyone wants to come to Seoul. Everything is in Seoul.
It's like everybody living in Manhattan, right?
Well, but Seoul is a little different though. Imagine if imagine if New York, Boston, LA, Chicago, Miami, like all these other cities, they were all one place, and then you had
you have options.
You had like I don't know, Washington D.C. was off somewhere else, and that was like the only other thing. That would be like Busan, right? But then the capital is Seoul as well. So
everyone wants to live in Seoul. I mean, if you're from a small city in Korea, your aspiration, if you don't want to go abroad, is to come live in Seoul. So that's another issue. Is like there's other good places in Korea. That are nice. I mean, Daegu is probably a lovely place, but like
probably.
No one wants to. I've never been to Daegu. I mean, but I mean, everyone wants to live in Seoul. That's going to raise the property values, and you could easily go to Daegu probably and get a house for $100,000 or maybe $150,000, but no one wants to do that.
Since you guys are from the States, I know you've been living in Asia for 11 years, but you still have like more knowledge on that. So in the States, there was 1% Occupy Wall Street movement, and then these days you have like Occupy Democrats and things like that. So you have kind of like a similar problem. Like how worse or better is the situation in the States, and do they have the same problem like like Hail-Joseon phenomenon?
Well, I think it's a millennial issue, right? And a part of the complaint with the Occupy Wall Street or 1% movement or whatever is that the way that the wealth is distributed is distributed to a very small portion of society, and then the rest of society doesn't see that benefit. So in that regard, I think that's a similar issue, but with Korea, you have these other things, the other challenges, like learning English, the cost of education, living at home with your parents until you're 30, which is probably very depressing. Like my mom kicked me out when I was 18, but a lot of people here will stay at home till they're 30 because the cost of housing is so expensive. So like an added level of like bullshit here in Korea that foreigners wouldn't have to deal with at all. But those same issues you're talking about exist, like income inequality.
It's in the same category, but like a lot worse.
Yeah, but we also have, an issue you guys don't really have to deal with is like police brutality. That's a big social issue in America, So there's other things in America that are different from Korea.
If you can support yourself, there's an expectation to a certain extent in most families that you are a person and you have your own individual choice. Really not so much here in Korea. But at the same time in Korea, like you're saying, I've seen people basically assault Korean police officers. I've seen Korean officers get slapped. I've seen people push Korean officers, and I'm not condoning that, but how refreshing is it to live in a society where you don't have to be afraid that a cop is going to murder you? And we're two white guys. Just imagine if we were minorities in the United States, like how much worse it is. So even though Korea has Hell Chosun and there are horrible problems, you guys have national health insurance. You have a wonderful public transportation system in and out of Seoul. You have companies. You have lots of things. The quality of life here is great. Yes, there are problems, but so many people here are college educated. I think it's the highest level in the OECD.
Something like 90.
Yeah, it's really, really high, right? So these are the reasons why I live in South Korea, because I want to live in a country where education is emphasized. I want to live in a country where I'm not afraid of the police. I want to live in a country where I can walk down an alleyway at 2 a.m. and no one is going to do anything to me. No one.
I spent a year and 3 months in Cambodia living there, and I was way happier living in Cambodia. In 2011 to 2012.
Okay.
So I thought that it was way more relaxed. People are poorer, but they're happier, and it seems like the variety of life there is different. Like in Korea, you go to any neighborhood. We're in Sinchon now. We could go over to Ide or whatever. And it's going to be the same kind of shops. It's going to be like a Paris baguette, and there's going to be a Starbucks, and it's going to be the same kind of like urban setting no matter where you go. So I think that kind of, especially in the winter, the hills get kind of dreary here. I think it's actually like I can see why people are a little depressed living like an urban jungle all the time. I live in Korea because I can make more money in Korea, but not necessarily because I enjoy the quality of life that Korea has to offer. But not to say that there isn't really good nightlife here. But if you do typical Korean nightlife, if I was like in Ajashi going out with my friends after work, it's go out, eat samgyeopsal, drink soju, and then I have to go home and like wake up again at 7 a.m. and then go to the office and stay again all night. So I can see how that lifestyle could get really repetitive. In Cambodia, I had a 3-hour lunch break every day. It just relaxing lifestyle. Finish work at 5 every day. So there's a big focus on being able to spend time with your family and your friends. Whereas in Korea, I just don't see that. Your friends become your coworkers, who you might not even like, but because they're above you, you have to spend time with them after work. And
we're gonna get to the next topic. Speaking of Bernie Sanders, how's he doing? How's Trump doing?
Up until when we started recording this, I saw from the New York Times, Trump's leading in Iowa. I don't think that there's any way he would lose, because it seems like he's far enough ahead of Cruz that it would be a pretty big upset if anything happened. Hillary is slightly above Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is more popular with younger people, and they seem to be more of an X factor, I think. So I wouldn't be surprised if Bernie won, but I think, at least now, it's looking good for Hillary.
I think Trump will get the Republican nomination probably, and I'm not going to call the Democratic nomination because I have no idea. I'm a Sanders supporter, but I don't know if he'll win it or not.
Like any good Sanders supporter, he has his doubts about Bernie Sanders.
Well, and also I think there's like a third possibility. They've been talking recently about Michael Bloomberg coming into the race, which would kind of mess things up for the Democrats because he hasn't. But if he does,
speculation
that would be it would be like kind of like it would add a layer of unpredictability to the election for sure, because that could go either way. They could take voters away from the Democrats, probably take a few away from Trump. It would mess up the whole election. American politics is like two-party system, so anytime there's a third party that gets thrown in, it just...
Well, I used to think, after living abroad in Germany and going to some other places and just learning about other governments around the world, I used to think that the American system, the two-party system, needed to be fixed and was like like just like in shambles and all this stuff. But then I moved to South Korea. The political system here is also very difficult. The parties are constantly changing their names.
Right.
There's all this infighting within the party. It's a lot of this stuff I can only read because it's like an English text or someone explains it to me. But gosh, complicated.
What is
politics.
it like? Is Moon Jae-in resigning or something right now, or?
No, this is my personal opinion, but he's still the leader of the party. But the resigning thing is, the resignation is more of like this title, like he's letting go of the title, but then like he's still,
he's behind the scenes still.
Probably like he can be nominated as a presidential candidate.
Yeah.
So it's mostly a two-party system in Korea as well. But one party, the Korean version, Republican Party, is like way stronger, and they have you can call them the establishment. So like what Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump have in common is that they're not from the establishment. They're from like Donald Trump was more like
I guess you could make that argument. Okay.
And a TV personality. Yeah. So he is not a conventional politician. Bernie Sanders is a politician, but he's not like Hillary Clinton. He's not.
He's a career politician, though.
He's a career politician who caucused with the Democrats, but was never a Democrat.
He's kind of an outsider, but I mean, he's buddies with all. I mean, he was in the Senate, so I mean that you can't really call someone who's in the Senate an outsider.
But Hillary Clinton is part of the establishment. Like,
sure.
I mean,
well, like, Hillary Clinton was also a senator at one point. All these people are really part of the establishment. Even Donald Trump, who they say he's not, but we had Ronald Reagan as our president, who was an actor.
Right.
Donald Trump had a show on The Apprentice in acting. So he's typical.
Plus, anything in America probably similar to here in South Korea. Once you get into the millions and billions of dollars, it's all politics, anyways. So these people who are running companies are just as political as the politicians. They all know each other. They all.
He does business with politicians, and
he used to say great things about the Democrats. Not so many years ago. So I mean, I hate the term flip flopper, but he's just such an obvious.
I read an article that I don't know if this is true or not, but supposedly him and Clinton are conspiring together to like take down the Republicans, basically. Like, so it could be like, I doubt that's the truth, but he's typical. The only thing that's not typical about Trump is he just has this ability to say whatever he wants and seemingly get away with it. And if 10 years ago, a candidate like that guy would have never gone anywhere in the Republican Party because of all the Christians. But it seems like the Republican Party is kind of shifting away from like these issues like abortion. Like that doesn't seem. I don't think Trump cares about abortion. Is he pro-choice?
I get with what you're saying here about that. Trump is not the religious leader that you would assume would have to be. But
he's been married like 3 times.
I listen to American talk radio a lot, and I hear these political ads. And I heard one like a week ago, and I posted on Facebook about it. And it basically was just talking about how much Trump is like Jesus Christ. they use those words, like it's like a preacher. I think it's like the president or the guy who's in charge of like what was it, Freedom University or what is that university, Liberty University, and he's like, Donald Trump reminds me of Jesus, and then he talks about like how he reminds him of Jesus. So. I don't know about that. I mean, they're still trying to put a Christian tie on him. I mean, I think what really makes Donald Trump so possible, because he's tried to run for things before in the past, is because we have a black president. I think if we didn't have a black president for the last 8-ish years, I don't know that Donald Trump's particular level of crazy would have been able to fit in. I think people are upset of. We had a progressive. Bernie Sanders is way more progressive than Barack Obama would ever be, but we had a progressive enough black president, and I think some people got upset.
That drove the Republican Party nuts. They were a little more center, and now they've grown like the Tea Party movement and stuff. They've grown a little more right wing and militant about issues like immigration. These kind of things have kind of sparked their interest. To be honest, I just don't think Trump, like, if he wins, he doesn't have the demographics in America,
the general election
to win at all.
That's what they say, is that like if he gets it wouldn't work out. But I gotta tell you, I'm from a rural area.
Oh God, I hope he doesn't.
And where I'm from and where you're from, there are a lot of people who are supporting. I mean, he's winning in Iowa right now. Yeah.
He would win my state for sure, but I don't think a Democrat has won South Dakota ever. We might have had Dakota. Anyway, there was a guy in the '60s who ran from my state as president in the general election. I think he lost to Nixon, but anyway, I don't think he even won his own state.
He wasn't
even. So yeah, we never vote Democrat where I'm from, even though I.
But the thing about Trump that I don't know if I should dare say respect about Trump, but the thing that I find at least refreshing about Trump is like you were saying, like he'll just say kind of whatever he wants. Right. And if it's one thing, and this is why I think some people who might have not been able to vote for Trump might vote for him, because at least it's refreshing that he's saying things and he's like, I'm not going to take crap from anybody, and I'm just going to, what he's saying is BS, and what he's, saying is like a lot of the time very horrible, but at the same time, he's saying it, and I think that in itself is refreshing to people. So if there is any positive that is able to be gained from Trump, might be that it shows that someone who at least is willing to just say things and deal with the consequences and not care, or just have enough money, enough power that he doesn't need to care. You can do that and attract people, where in the past it seems more like you give somewhat reasonable answers, and if someone asks you a direct question like we see in some of the debates, you kind of push to the side and you're like, well, I want to talk about this. Donald Trump doesn't do that. He does it in a different way, but he does it in a more direct way.
Like your fantasy, like the imagination. Like, and
I would like to see people that I believe in, like Bernie Sanders or some other progressive people, I would like to see them do more of this. I would like to see Bernie Sanders look Hillary Clinton in the eye and say, I will be a better president than you because I don't take bribes. I will be a better president than you because I stand up for things that you don't stand up for. I'm okay with Hillary Clinton. If she becomes the Democratic nominee, I will vote for her, most likely. I will vote for her because I would rather have her than the Republican version, right? But at the same time, I'd rather support Bernie Sanders. And if the things, once again, not belittling her, not putting her down, but the things that are obvious differences between them, if you look at their record, he needs to look her at the eye and say that. And if there's someone he can learn that from, it might be Trump, because Trump doesn't care. He says whatever he wants. And I would like to see more of that from other politicians.
I think though there's like signs of like even fascism in Trump. He was like saying last week that he could stand in the middle of the street and shoot someone and still not lose voters. I mean, so like if you're starting to talk like that, and you see video clips where he's telling his supporters to drag out a protester out of his violence. So that kind of stuff. I mean, that's kind of frightening. If that person was to get elected, just imagine the policies that they would try to implement. So for me, that's kind of frightening. I hope that people realize he shouldn't be taken seriously and don't vote for him. But it seems like he's going to win the primary at least. Maybe.
So how do you view Korean politics compared to the U.S. election? Obviously, like we're not like all way too savvy about the Korean politics, but like just for you can freely talk about your opinions on the.
Can we freely talk?
I don't know. You're the lawyer, right?
My visa's up for renewal one of these days.
What I'm interested in is the impressions that the experts have on the Korean politicians and Korean politics as in general. So like. I'm not sure if you really catch up with all the details, but I don't expect that. But still, like
I think a lot of a lot of expats are going to be more inclined to be left leaning in their politics. So if you get someone like Park Geun-hye, who's in president right now, they're probably going to disagree with a lot of her policies. But at the same time, when No Myung-han was the president of Korea, he's more left leaning, or supposed to be more left leaning. But I see some guy like that as like a conservative Republican. So it seems like the left in Korea is more right, and the right is more right than it would be in America. Although, I mean, I think like...
so like Korean politics is more conservative?
I think both parties are more conservative. I think someone like, it really depends on the way things work out. Like when Lee Myung-bak was the president and Bush were the president, it worked out because their political ideologies kind of aligned, so they were able to kind of see eye to eye on some issues. Yeah. Now when you have someone like Obama who's a little bit more left, which I don't even consider Obama being that left. I think he's fairly center. But you get someone like him and he has to deal with President Park. They're not going to see eye to eye, I think. So that's like why you're seeing Korea kind of tilt a little bit more towards China these days, because Obama and Park, I don't think they get along very well, or I don't think their policy agendas line up together.
I think it's safe to say that, like you were saying, most foreigners, at least Western foreigners, are going to be more progressive rather than being conservative, although, of course, obviously on both sides. I don't think foreigners have a very high level of respect or a very high opinion of Korean politicians. In the news, it's always just scandals, bribes. People get appointed. Was it Park Geun-hye tried to appoint like 2 or 3 different people for a position?
Prime Minister.
And every time something came up,
she had tons of problems getting her cabinet filled because it was like every person she would put in, there would be some sort of scandal. I think Her last prime minister, he just got a suspended jail sentence. This was just released today or yesterday.
He just
He got-
pronounced guilty like a couple of days ago.
He got like 8 months sentence, and then they suspended it for 2 years. So he has to be good for 2 years now.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll make some sort of political comeback or something. And then I remember Lee Myung-bak's brother. I think he actually had to go to jail. So there's always, it's always like these perpetual scandals. But again, I don't think foreigners, for the most part, follow Korean politics enough to really even have any idea
But
what's
if
going
they do
on.
follow anything on just like the face value, it's going to be scandals. It's going to be, especially with the current administration, it's going to be peaceful protests being cracked down upon by thousands of police officers. It's going to be
That was happening with
that
Lee Myung-bak,
older guy
too.
that I think, is he in like a coma? He's in the hospital because he got hit by the water cannon.
Yeah.
All the video of that. I mean, even
Talking about Vietnam,
the UN,
bomber.
the special rapporteur for like human rights for the UN. I can't remember the exact title. They just released a report that's saying that individual rights of expression and able to gather in Korea, they're not going further, they're going back.
Deteriorating.
They're deteriorating, yeah. So, like I said, a lot of people might not pay attention to it as much as, some people, but their general opinions are not going to be good.
So what's your opinion on, what's your observation on like their speaking style, their oral, ability? Because like they don't really give the press conference.
Yeah, I think
much
Park
as-
They
Park
take
Geun-hye hasn't given.
pre-approved
Maybe she's given 2 or 3
Yeah,
or
2 or 3.
yeah. I mean, she hasn't.
Alright.
Yeah, she hasn't. She doesn't put herself out there as much as an American politician would. But at the same time, I mean, it's individual leadership style. I don't know if Bush gave as many as Obama has given either. So maybe that's an individual leadership style. But I think if you're the
Still more than
president,
3.
you got to get up there and you got to
Yeah.
say something, once in a while. Yeah, give a national, like in America, a lot of times what they do, if a president has a big announcement, all the major broadcast companies will give them airtime. So they get on there, speak to the nation, reassure them, whatever. I don't think I've seen Park Geun-hye do that one time. Where she gets on television. Hello, Korea. Tonight we're going to talk about this issue that I think is important to our country. I think she could be a little more public in the way she deals with the citizens here, and that would probably give them some more trust towards the policies she wants to implement.
Yeah.
But it's weird because at the same time, while all the things that we've just discussed, and you talk about how both parties seem to be conservative, Korea still has social programs. You have national healthcare system. You have all this public transportation. I mean, there needs to be more pensions because 50% of elderly Koreans live in poverty. But there's still, it's not this capitalist country that has no social anything. So. There's money in the government that goes to help Koreans.
Sure. There's a pension system.
But it's weird because, as you mentioned, there's still a lot of conservatism in the government. So Korea, that's one of the reasons why Korea is so interesting to me.
I think and like with the left leaning, like the labor unions here do have some power. I know they get scared if the taxi drivers say we're all gonna strike. That really does scare the government, and they do have some power in those regards. So citizens have, in a lot of the way that citizens express their power here against the government is through demonstration. So
Strong
people are upset, they'll
yeah.
let the government know. That's how Korea got democracy in the first place, right? It was people taking to the streets and finally having enough of it. So. One thing that you can't do with a democracy is you can't. You guys have elected Park Geun-hye for 5 years. She's almost done. So if we can survive a couple more years, you can't. I don't think it's fair for people to go out into the streets and violently remove her from power because they did elect her. And you see a lot of people that they would like to remove her from power, but that's not how democracy works. That's next time vote your guy in then. And I don't know if that'll be able to happen because the way the demographics work here, all the old people are going to vote for conservatives. And what's the majority of the population? Old people. So you're going to have to wait till. Sadly, you're going to have to wait till some of those people die off before things probably will become more progressive.
I can't disagree with you. You go outside of Seoul and it's very different. Some places, different places, and then the candidates usually have strong connections from where they're from. Park Geun-hye is not from Seoul, so.
A lot of older people respect her father too. If you speak to
That's
a guy.
what I'm saying, though. They have the strong connection. So
Yeah, that's how she got up to the position, president.
Mm-hmm.
So, like 2 months ago, I think it was 2 months ago, there was a demonstration. Like that was against the policies of Park administration. Did you guys see that? Like
Yeah,
it was
I saw
kind of
the
huge.
video.
Yeah, footage of like the water cannon thing and that kind of style. Yeah, like what was your opinion?
Well, I mean, I thought the police were a little bit overhanded with them. I mean, you obviously, if you're going to get that many people to gather to protest, there's some issue that needs to be addressed. But I don't know. I mean, there has to be some security. If you're up there toppling buses, police buses, and like these guys who are doing their job are just some 19-year-old kids out of school, they didn't sign up to like go to battle with the citizens. You know, they're just doing their job.
Yeah, but what bus did that old guy topple? That got hit.
No, he didn't do anything wrong. But there probably was some chaos going on.
Yeah. But I mean, I forget when it was. There was a protest. I think it had to do. It was a tax protest or a business related protest, maybe from the labor union or something. They scheduled that they were going to appear, and then the government was like, you can't do it, and then they did it anyways, and it was fine. It was a peaceful protest. They didn't like shoot people with water cannons and stuff like that. And so one of my friends who writes for a newspaper here, he penned an op-ed that was like, there's going to be a protest tomorrow. Wouldn't it be great if the police just didn't show up and just see what would happen? Because every time that there's a problem with one of these big protests, it's not that like the protesters like set a building on fire. Sure, there's been some damage and police have even been injured as well. But it always seems that it's related to the police interacting with the protesters as opposed to anything the protesters do. And I think what he raised was a very good point. What if the police didn't show up, or if they acted differently?
It's like in Chicago, like when there's demonstration, non-GMO. You know, it's more like a festival. It's more like a performance.
It is,
people
yeah.
march,
Yeah.
people walk down the street, like thousands of people walk down the street, and the police officers, they kind of escort them.
It depends on what they're protesting, though. There was in Seattle in 1999. There was a protest against I think a G7 meeting was there, and that turned violent, where they rioted and smashed some stores up. So
and
I think it depends on what they're
protests
protesting.
that have been going on and ongoing in Ferguson, and other
some of those turned a little
there
violent.
There are cops who have been filmed, and they just say these horrible things, and like there's this guy. I can't remember when it was, but a cop was filmed basically saying, like, I'm going to murder you.
Yeah, and then, there was also people shooting at the police there, too. So, I mean...
No, but different situations. That was not that situation, different situations. So what I'm trying to say is that there doesn't seem to, in the United States, there doesn't seem to be a general rule. There can be a protest that can be peaceful, and it can be a festival, and then there can be times where people are peacefully protesting, but they're upset, and they're very angry because they see that someone has been murdered by the police based on the color of their skin, and then the police do things and they say things that don't help the situation. And then of course sometimes there are things going on that could injure the police as well, as you just mentioned. So it's on both sides. I'm just saying that here in Korea, in my perspective, from everything I've seen and what I've seen reported in different reports that I've done, it seems that the police interaction with the protesters is where the problem begins, as opposed to what the protesters are doing. Yes, the protesters have hurt buses or things like that, but that always happens like any kind of protest. I mean, that happens in the United States after someone wins the Stanley Cup, right? I mean, that stuff happens, right? That doesn't mean you have to do things to escalate the situation.
Well, it seems like for every, like, if Chance and I showed up outside of Sinchon Station with signs, there's a good chance that, like, 6 police buses would come rocking up. You know, so it seems like every time there's any small protest, they send in, probably too much police force for what it's required. I went to the taxi. They're demonstrating against their wages. This is back in like 2013, I think 2012. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't violent. They were giving speeches about how they wanted higher wages, but they were just encircled by police. You know, so it's like, I don't know if that kind of force is really always necessary.
Any other comments? Like, I ran out of all the questions.
No, not really. Yeah. Please edit it so we don't get deported here. Don't get us deported from your country.